Bəli Kamran. Gözləri açma.
Oh, here it is. Can you see it, Elmer?
Something is being loaded on screen. Yes, now it's visible. Perfect.
Okay.
So in 3 minutes we start.
Okay. Thank you, Elmer. Is it gone? Can you see me okay? I can't hear you.
I can see you, Mark. Mike.
Okay, I'm just going to... Okay. What I will do, Elmer, is I will... it's a short PowerPoint, so there's not many slides. I'll talk through it, and at the end I'll switch it off and we can take questions and answers.
Okay. Okay.
So I will wait until you tell me to start and then I'll share.
Okay. In 2 minutes we are starting.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay, Mike, I think we can start now. Hello, everyone. Today we have a pleasure to welcome Mr. Mayk Maunselin in today's webinar. Mr. Mayk Maunselin is an academic lecturer in advanced communication and presentation skills. He's a faculty of applied sciences and technology at Limerick Institute of Technology in Ireland. Mr. Maunselin helps students, professionals, and corporate leaders to develop their confidence and personal communication style for success. And Mr. Maunselin has over 30 years of experience as a lecturer in science and advanced communication and presentation skills. He is also a well-known international conference speaker. He is a mountaineer and expedition leader, as well as he is a management consultant. I would like to take this opportunity and thank to Mr. Maunselin for agreeing to deliver this webinar for our students. Mr. Maunselin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elmar, and to everybody at Western Kaspi University for inviting me to this. So, salam, Sizanala, Gorishmeya, Mam Nunam. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. It's a great honor for me to speak at Western Kaspi University. So what I will do is I will share my PowerPoint first, and the PowerPoint is short, and then we can have some question and answers before I finish. So Elmer, you can please tell me if when my PowerPoint is connected.
Okay. Okay, your PowerPoint is connected. We can see it.
That's great. Thank you, Elmar. So it's a pleasure to be back in Western Kaspi University, and I have many friends there. It's not my first time speaking at Western Kaspi University. I was there in 2019 at the International Conference on Mountain Landscapes Conservation Biodiversity with my very good friend and colleague, Professor Hussein Bagirov, who kindly invited me to speak. Professor Bagirov is one of those people I've learned a lot from over the years from working with him. And one of the things I've learned from Professor Bagirov is he doesn't follow standards. Instead, what Professor Bagirov does is he takes the standards that everybody else tries to reach, and he makes that just the basis, and he achieves much more. He sets new standards for other people to follow. And it's been a great pleasure working with him over the years. One of the things I noticed when I came to Azerbaijan was I didn't realize how many connections there were between Ireland, my country, and Azerbaijan. And I was really, really surprised. I really enjoyed being in the city and in Azerbaijan, and somebody even got me to try on these strange hats to make me become an Azerbaijani or Azeri. I made a lot of connections there, and I never met such a welcoming country or group of people. And I'll always remember the first day I walked into Western Kaspi University, and the first thing that greeted me had a huge impact on me. There was all these smiling faces. And whenever you're giving a presentation, when you go internationally, very seldom when you walk into the center do you meet so many smiling, friendly faces. It really relaxed me, and I know it relaxed a lot of the people from the other 30 countries that attended that conference. So for me, my abiding memory of Azerbaijan is of a warm, friendly, welcoming people. And that is being lost in a lot of countries now. And it's very important that this part of your culture continues. Ireland, as I said, has a lot of links or a lot of similarities. We share the same values, and we have come from a very similar experience. Ireland, as you may see from the slide here on the left, Ireland is the furthest western country in Europe. We're further west than Sweden, France, Spain, and Portugal. We're right out here. But you may notice that part of Ireland, up here in the northeast corner, while we're surrounded by Britain, part of Ireland still belongs to the UK. I know you have a part of your country which there is controversy and conflict over, but similarly in Ireland, we've gone through a similar process. We had a 30-year war over a part of our country as well. So we share a similar background. We've both been ruled by other countries and we've got independence, but part of our country is still in conflict. So we have a lot of similar historical issues and examples. But that's in the past. And looking forward, I'm delighted to say that Ireland will be playing Azerbaijan in football in September in the qualifiers for the European Championships. And I hope all of you in Azerbaijan will be shouting for the team in green. So we have a lot of similarities, and I look forward to making closer connections. And I think these events like sport between Ireland and Azerbaijan and our cultural similarities will help us bond together as two nations. So thank you again for inviting me, and I'm going to present my presentation now. And my presentation is about communication skills and why graduates need communication skills in the future for business and for their career. When I was born in Ireland, Ireland had the lowest level of education in Europe. We had very few people going to second level and very few people going to third level to university. Now we have the highest rate of university attendance in Europe. And what we're realizing, we have lots of multinational and American companies. And what we do realize is that for students and businesses to be successful, it's not about the amount of academic degrees you have, but it's how you communicate. And the communication skills we use in business will help you collaborate with your colleagues. So that's teamwork. It will help you show that you're creative and problem solving, and also that you can connect and communicate with clients. And these are the three skills that international studies are showing that graduates of the future will need. And I want to do three things today in this short presentation. I want to talk to you about three rhetorical devices, three methods of communication that are really, really important for anybody communicating, whether you're in politics, business, science, technology, or the arts. There are three important devices that everybody needs to communicate well so that you can succeed in your career, no matter what that is, and that you can become a leader and an influencer. Then I'm going to talk about three parts of the brain, how our brain works to communicate. And then I'm going to talk about three tips for communication, which builds the rhetorical devices and the three parts of the brain, and show you and talk about three techniques to help anybody communicate better. So the first thing I want to talk about are the three rhetorical devices. These are not new, and they go back 2,500 years to Aristotle and the ancient Greeks. When in ancient Greece, there was very little writing. The public couldn't really read a lot. So it was very important for politicians and delivering speeches. The ancient Greeks knew three really important things about communication. And those important aspects of communication are very, very, even more important today than they were then. And the three of those were logos, pathos, and ethos. The logos mean this is the logical part, that any speech or presentation or communication must have a logical part. It must appear logical. So you must have a logical argument. That's the logos. So if you stand up to speak in a company or at a meeting or as a student presenting data, you must have logic. You must have facts. Your facts must be correct. The second part, the pathos, is about emotion. You must make an emotional connection with your audience. So that's really important. An emotional connection. So your audience must feel you're one of them. And ethos, the third part, is the credibility of the speaker. They must respect you as a speaker. They must think this person speaking to me is credible. They're not a threat to one of my friends. They're credible. And these three parts, Aristotle said, are essential for any speech or communication to win your audience. Good politicians know this. And when I write a speech, a political speech, I have these three parts in it. But as we'll see, not all of these parts have equal measure, and sometimes people get them wrong, put the emphasis on the wrong part. So to look at these three parts, any audience you're speaking to may not realize that these three parts are needed for your presentation. And you may be even thinking now, as you're sitting here watching me, you might have these three questions about the logos, the pathos, and the ethos might be going through your mind. And you might be asking, do I trust this guy? And that's the ethos. Do I trust this guy, Mayk Maunselin? Ethos. Is what he's saying, do I care or am I interested in what he's saying? That's the pathos. Is it why should I listen to him? Do I care about what he's saying? Have I any interest? That's the pathos. And does what he's saying sound logical or make sense? And that's the logos. So even with an audience realizing it, these three questions go through their mind every time they have to sit and listen to a presentation. Whether it's a politician going to a rural community, into a farms, into the mountains and speaking to the local community, without the people even knowing, they're thinking ethos, pathos, and logos. Especially the pathos, do I trust this person? The ethos, do I trust this person? The pathos, why should I care about what he's saying? And the logos is, does it make sense? Everybody, all of us think about these three things. And that's what the ancient Greeks meant about logos, pathos, and ethos. And these are relevant even more today. And it's really interesting that while this was written 2,500 years ago in ancient Greek, it's important now. And if any of those three parts are missing from a speech, the speech or your presentation will fail. So if you're standing up, if you're working for a company or a business and you're speaking to other people in the company or customers, or if you're a politician and you're going to speak to people in a factory workers, farmers, or making a speech, if any part of these are missing, your speech will fail. We need the three of these in every communication or speech. Excuse me. The most difficult part to get right, especially for a politician or a business person or a scientist, an engineer, or somebody in technology, is the ethos and the pathos. That's where most people fall down. The logos, the logic, the data and statistics, most politicians can pay someone to come up with the data and the statistics for them. Scientists, engineers learn how to gather data and statistics. ethos. And if you get the pathos and the ethos right, and that's what I want to speak to you today about, you will be a successful communicator and you can become a leader in your industry or whatever you're studying in. So this was written 2,500 years ago, but more recently, neuroscience has mapped the brain. And similarly, there are 3 parts of the brain have been identified as important in communication. And it's really important that we understand these 3 parts. I'm going to start at the bottom here in the red. The bottom part is the oldest part of the brain in red. And that has to do with our survival. It's the oldest part that has developed, and it keeps us alive. It's survival. And this makes decisions for us without us even knowing. In the blink of an eye, it's the instinctive part of the brain. And that is constantly working away in the background, and it's telling us, are we safe? Are we threatened? And it's making the split decisions we're not even aware of. So when somebody walks into a room, if you walk into a room, somebody will make a split-second decision about you. And if someone else walks into a room, you will make a split-second decision. In the blink of an eye, 1/10 of a second, you will make a decision about them. And that is something that's instinctive. It's an ancient part of the brain that's used to keep us to help us survive. And the thoughts and the process that goes on in that part of the brain, we find difficult to control. It's subconscious. And that's why we often find it difficult to say why we like someone. And this is the bottom part, this survival, the instinctive, some people call it the reptilian brain, because it developed way back in ancient times. And it works in all sorts of ways to keep us safe. The next part of the brain is the emotional part, this blue part up here. This is the emotional part, and this is the part where all the chemicals are produced. So when we're in love, we release different chemicals into the brain. We release serotonin and oxytocin into the blood. So, and it creates emotion. It's used for social bonding and make us feel part of a community. So if you want to trigger somebody's emotional response, when you trigger an emotional response with somebody, you make them feel good. So if I say, Elmer, you're a super guy. You don't know how influential you are. You're a great guy to work with. You're such a talented person. I'm releasing lots of serotonin into Elmer's brain, and he feels good. So when we feel part of a community, serotonin and oxytocin are released into our brain. And this is the chemical part. And it helps us have an emotional response. And when I say an emotional response, I don't mean starting to cry, but feel part of a community. So when somebody walks into a room or stands up to give a presentation, these two, the first part, the red and the blue part, get triggered. The red part, when someone walks into a room, immediately we look up and our instinctive brain makes 3 decisions. Is this person a threat? Is this person a friend? Or is this person a potential mate or partner? And often when we look at somebody for the first time and we see them, our brain in the blink of an eye makes a judgment on them. And then we often use the logic to back up that judgment. And we find, are we part of their group? And often we have no control over these 2 parts. These are 2 very important parts of the brain. And they're instinctive, and often we don't realize they're guiding us in the decisions we make. The third part, this green part up here, the frontal lobe, is the logical part of the brain. and it tells us if something is logical. It's the part of the brain we learn in, where we learn new languages, we learn facts and figures, and that's the logical part of the brain. So we have three parts of the brain. They all have a different function, but as a communicator or a leader, it's important that you understand these three parts of the brain. So what I'm going to do is try make a link between what the ancient Greeks, Aristotle, his three parts of a communication, and what neuroscientists say now are the three parts of our brain that guide the way we think and what we believe and how we feel. So here on the left, I've got Aristotle's three parts of communication: the logos, the pathos, and the ethos. And these map. So this was written 2,500 years ago, but it maps with the brain that scientists understand now that we have, neuroscientists. Again, we look at the logos, which is the logical part of your argument or your communication. In the audience's mind, they're asking, does this make sense, what this person is saying? The pathos is the emotional part. So the audience are thinking, why should I care about what this person is saying? Doesn't make, it has nothing to do with me. What's the benefit? And the ethos is the survival part. And that part of the brain is asking is, do I trust this person? Is he somebody I can trust, or is he a threat? So what the ancient Greeks knew about communication, we can now link to the brain, to what neuroscientists have found recently in the brain. And this helps us to communicate much better. What's really important, and the big mistake that communicators, politicians, and especially scientists, business people, engineers, the big mistake they make when they go to give a presentation is, because their training is in data and statistics, is they focus mainly on the logical part of an argument. And that's a big mistake. Before you speak to any audience, you must satisfy the ethos. You must build trust with your audience. So bad communicators, when they begin their speech, will start with the logic, with the data, with the facts. And they'll spend 80% of their time talking about facts and data and logic. And that will kill their argument. Because the very first thing that an audience asks is, do I trust this person? And that happens instinctively without they're realizing it. And they'll rely on past experience, social training, and cultural training. Do I trust this person? And unless you learn how to build trust first, and then make an emotional connection with the audience, your argument and your logic, which might be 100% correct, will be lost. So opening your speech or your communication just with logic and spending 80% of your time on the logic, you will lose your argument. All good politicians, business people, and scientists who want to get their message across always revert that. They spend 80% of their time on the trust, building trust, and building emotional connection with the audience. And then they put in the logic. So that's a really, really important rule. And lots of politicians do this. So how do we do it? And politicians that aren't really popular get elected because of this. Donald Trump was a master at this. Very little of what he said made logical sense. But he got elected because he made an emotional connection with lots of people who felt their jobs were in threat, their way of life was in threat. They may not have trusted him, but what he did do is say, well, you can trust me because I'm not one of the people currently in government. Boris Johnson has done it by taking the UK out of Europe. A lot of his arguments didn't make sense. There was no logic to them. But people trusted him because he connected emotionally with them. And I'm going to tell you how some of the techniques they use in that. Before I move on to the next part about giving you these examples of how you can use logic, pathos, and ethos in your communications to connect with people's part of the brain and how they think, I just want to check, are there any questions at this stage? Am I going too fast? Am I going too slow?
You're going okay.
Okay, thanks, Elmer.
Everything is okay.
If anybody posts in a question, you might let me know.
Yeah, if anyone has a question, please raise your hand so I will give you a chance to ask a question.
Because I will take questions at the end, but if something occurs to people now, they can put up their hand or post in a question.
Okay.
But if I am going too fast, Elmer, please tell me to slow down or repeat something if it's not understood.
Okay. Okay.
So I've looked at what the ancient Greeks said, and that when you read what Aristotle and Socrates said about speeches, it's really, really applicable today, and it's been backed up now by neuroscientists. So how can we use it when we go to give a presentation or a speech at work or to your colleagues? And this is something I have to do every day. And I see people fail, especially politicians, especially scientists, especially engineers, people who work with data all day. They hate going out into the community to speak to at a public meeting because they're used to logic, but they're not used to making this emotional connection. And there's a very important saying that the American civil rights activist Maya Angelou made, and she said, people will never forget what you do. Or sorry, people will forget what you do. People will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you make them feel. So it's important that we connect very early on when we're going to give a presentation, that we connect with people and their feelings, their emotions, and we make a connection with them. So if we go back to our 3 parts of the brain here, we'll start with the instinctive brain down here, this ethos. This is the instinctive brain. Do I trust this person? So if you're going to give a presentation, and I see politicians fail all the time, and after they failed, then they come to me and say, Mike, how did I fail? Why did they not listen? Why did they say boo and not listen? Everything I said made sense. And I have to say to them that people make a split decision as soon as they see you. And then they use the facts and the logic to back up their initial emotion. So when a politician or an engineer or a scientist walks into a room to give a speech to the public or to a group, they make a split decision on do they trust this person? And once they make that decision, and they make it in the blink of an eye, in a tenth of a second, it's very, very difficult to change their mind. And a lot of politicians, scientists, engineers don't understand this. And that's what bases, so do they trust him? And then they make an emotional connection. Said, why should I care about if they trust him, they'll care about what you're going to say. They don't trust you, they won't care about what you say. So how do we start with the instinctive brain, and how do we get through to that part as a speaker? The instinctive brain is scanning the environment all the time, and it looks at the face and it sees, is that a face I'm familiar with? So that's why politicians love social media, and they love to get their image on social media, because people see the face and think, that's a famous person, and they may trust them. And they compare faces to the past. Now, there's not much you can do about your face. I guess you could go to America and get cosmetic surgery, and that might help, or it might not help. But what we need to do, what you can do, if you're going to give a speech, let's say you're going into the mountains of Azerbaijan, into one of the villages, and you're going to change, maybe you're going to build something there, or ask them to do something they've never done before, change how they farm, and you've got to win them over. But no matter where you're going, whether it's to a group of workers in the city, to speak to a rural community, as a scientist, as a business person, as a technologist, as a politician, the very first thing, which is often forgotten, it's very simple, is smile. So smiling is such an important aspect. And that's why I put up this poster, or this picture. As soon as I arrived in Azerbaijan, everybody smiled and I felt relaxed. I felt in safe hands, I could trust them. So you're training your students well. Smile, and then you need to look like one of them. And by looking like one of them, I mean dress appropriately. So if you're a politician, or if you're an engineer or a scientist, and you're going to a community in the mountains, and you arrive in your best suit with your tie and your briefcase, or your expensive laptop, they're immediately going to look and say, he's not one of us. I don't trust him. So maybe take off the tie, maybe bring a notebook, or try to look like one of them. Because one of the things that drives whether people trust you or not is, are you one of the tribe? And we all dress in uniforms, whether we like it or not. So I'm dressed in a uniform today of an academic. But when I go into the mountains, I obviously don't dress like this. Or if I'm going to present at a different meeting, I'll dress smart, but to match the audience, to suit the audience. So smile and try to dress appropriately. Don't be overdressed or underdressed. And that's very important. Some politicians in community meetings will take off their jacket and they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll try to look like a worker. If a politician, a country leader in a time of conflict or war, will often wear a military uniform when he's talking about times in war. So he'll dress different than when he's meeting other world leaders, he'll dress in a suit. So that's important too. You want to appear professional, but you want to dress like the rest of the audience. The other thing is what you say and how you say it. And you need to understand, to move on to the pathos and the emotions, you need to establish a connection quickly with your audience. So you need to understand their values and their concerns, and you need to bring solutions to them. The presentation is not about you, it's all about them. So you need to make a statement very quickly saying you share their concerns, or you're bringing a solution to their problem, or how this will benefit them. And one of the best ways to actually make a connection that people trust you and care about what you're going to say is by telling a story. And storytelling in communication is now a huge business. One of the things I do now with lots of business people and students is teach them to take their data, their logic, their statistics, and turn it into a story. and make a connection with their audience. So if you do go to a rural community or factories, you might say, well, my father actually had a farm, my grandfather had a farm, and he used to always tell me. And if you can make that connection with people, or when my mother came from this area, or she told me in the past the story of whatever the issue is, if you can make a connection, if you know and show, and understand their concerns, you share their values, and you're bringing solutions, they will trust you and they will care about what you've said because you've made an emotional connection. You've respected them by showing you understand them and their culture. And because people care mostly, people care about themselves and they care about the issues in their everyday life. One of the mistakes people make now is not respecting cultures. And I think it was 2 weeks ago, there was a very good webinar, which Elmer hosted as well, with a speaker from Indonesia about culture. And one of the things we notice in Europe now is because we speak English is the working language in Europe, and I know you are very good English speakers and you've got some excellent translators and your English lecturers in Azerbaijan. I've met them there in Baku. But understanding people's culture, and now we live in a globalized society, so if you are trying to make a connection and build business connections and a career with Europeans, you can often get it wrong at the very start. And one of the things I've been told by people who hire in companies is they do the interview online now, and if the person on the interview opens with, hi guys, how's it going? Or hi guys, what's up? In Europe, that's considered a very bad opening. And this is coming from YouTube. Often when you look up videos on YouTube, if it's American, they'll often start with things like, hi guys, what's up? Or hi guys, what's happening? That may be okay to another North American. But Europe is a big collection of cultures. And in a business or political or science situation, that's not a good opening. So that's why I try to open by saying, it's nice to meet you in Azerbaijani. If I had opened with, hi guys, what's up? Or hi guys, what's happening? I wouldn't have been respecting your culture. What's even worse is when somebody who isn't American opens their conversation or their speech with, hi guys, what's up? We call them plastic Americans because they're not real Americans, but they're learning this online from Americans. And it's not respectful to the culture you're delivering with. And similarly, even within a country, you need to make a strong emotional connection with the audience. What are the audience's problems? What are the issues they're facing? What are the things they're concerned about now? And if you can address those issues, they will listen to you, and then you can put in your logic. So the survival part, the ethos part maps with the survival part of the brain. Do I trust the person? And you need to build trust with them. In the emotional part, why should I care? Is about they'll care if you can make a statement very early on, not hi guys, what's happening, but open with a statement saying, I understand your concerns. I share the same concerns. I understand your problems, and say what the problem or the concern is and how you're going to address that. You must acknowledge the people in the room and their concerns. And when you do that, you release oxytocin into their brain. And that oxytocin is the chemical, the hormone, the steroid, the hormone that's associated with building a sense of community or belonging. And then they'll think, they believe, they accept you as being part of them. If you're bringing the solution, you acknowledge their issues and their values, and you're bringing a solution to them. But then the logical part of the brain is the last thing you should address. And most good speakers will spend 80% of their time addressing the ethos and the pathos, the building the trust and making an emotional connection. And the last thing, 20%, will be logic, will be the logical part. If you can win people's trust and make an emotional connection, and logic, you're lost from the start, because you have about 2 or 3 seconds once you stand up to give your presentation to win trust and make an emotional connection. If you arrive early to a meeting, you can obviously meet people before you start and start creating connections that way. But the ancient Greeks knew that logic, this logical part, was an important part, but it's not the most important part. Logic, data, and statistics are great if you're speaking to a specialist audience. So if you're a science student and you're speaking to other scientists, they will expect data and statistics. If you're a business student or you're speaking to other business people, that's a specialist audience. They will expect business data and business analysis. But if you're speaking to a non-specialist audience, and politicians know this really well, if you're speaking to a non-specialist audience, often facts and figures, while they might be 100% correct, don't matter. It's really the values, the trust, and the emotion. And people will decide whether they trust somebody in a tenth of a second, and they will use the emotion and logic to back up that initial feeling. And it's very hard to change. For the logical part, presenting logical data to a non-specialist audience, to a community group, or somebody in another village or a town or a group of workers, is difficult. So you need to turn that data into a story. Again, say what the data means. Say what the benefits of the data will be for them. So turn your numbers into a narrative. Many disagreements often differ or involve, many disagreements often can't be solved by logic. They can only be solved by trust and building an emotional connection. So if you're presenting data on a screen, try not to have lots of numbers, try to have simple graphics, and tell the story behind the numbers and the graphics. So I hope, Elmer, I've not gone too far over my time. I think I've been speaking for about 40 minutes.
No, we have around 10 minutes. If you want, you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So making this emotional connection is really, really important. Visualize the data. And what many politicians use to get the logic across is a lot of people subconsciously consider messages important, or logic or data important, if they can remember it easily. So a lot of politicians use the rule of 3. They break down slogans down into 3. So even if they take their data or the statistics, they break it into a slogan. Barack Obama had a slogan, "Yes, we can." It was 3 words. Churchill, the Prime Minister in the UK during the Second World War, when they were at their darkest moment, came up with a slogan. "We will fight them on the beaches. We will fight them in the fields. We will fight them on the streets." A 3-word slogan. Boris Johnson had a slogan when Britain were leaving Europe. "Get Brexit done." And even going back to Hitler and his Minister of Communications, they had a saying, if you say something once, it's a lie. If you say it many times, it becomes fact. People like simple stories, and they like simple 3-word slogans or 3 phrases. And watch for it yourself on the TV. If you get a politician on, they'll often make 3 statements. People remember, for some reason, and neuroscientists don't know why it works, but 3 things. The Romans, Veni, Vidi, Vici. We came, we saw, we conquered. We like this repetition of 3s. We like rhymes. If you can make something a rhyme, we will fight them on the beaches, we will fight them in the fields, we will fight them in the streets. Because we learn, that's the fundamental way we learn. We learn things as children in rhyming language. And also trying to, when politicians use, the other technique politicians use to get people motivated is they use short sentences and the tone of voice. So Barack Obama, when Barack Obama is speaking, he uses long sentences and he speaks very slowly. And then he'll pause and he'll let you take it in. And he's using a rhetorical device that's reassuring, it's comforting, it's like a father figure. He's trying to calm you, make you sure there's no problems. We can solve this. Yes, we can. We can get this done. And that's his style of speaking. It's very reassuring. And what he's doing is releasing cortisol and oxytocin into the brain to make everybody feel part of something. But another politician might say, we're going to build a wall. I got about Mexico. We're going to keep the Mexicans out. Why are we losing? We're going to make America great again. Short sentences. And as children, we learn when people use short sentences to pay attention. Your parent says, don't do that. Don't go there. Be safe. Eat your food. So we're used to responding. And that releases cortisol from the adrenal gland into us to make us think. So you can imagine when Ireland are playing Azerbaijan in football in September, and I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. I can tell you in advance. It will be half time, and Azerbaijan will be losing by 10 goals. And the coach at half time is not going to come in to the dressing room and give the Azerbaijan football team a long speech like Barack Obama, very calm and very considerate and make them comfortable. He's going to be very short and direct. He's going to say, these little pale Irish people should not be winning. Tackle them. Azerbaijan is watching you. We want to win. Where is your passion? And then the match will end and it will be 10 goals all. It will be a draw. But he will use a different type of emotional connection to get the logic across that they need to score goals. So there's a lot of different techniques. Now, I spend a whole year with my students delivering this. I'm trying to cram it into 40 minutes. So there's a lot we've left out. We haven't spoken about body language, about how you send messages with your body. Is it open? Is it friendly? Are you cutting people off? There's lots we haven't covered about speaking in different contexts. But if anybody ever needs help giving a presentation, I'd be happy for you to contact me and connect with me through LinkedIn. So I hope some of this has made sense to you. And again, I'm going to finish with Maya Angelou, the American civil rights activist. People will forget what you do, they will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And no matter what presentation you're giving, you must know your audience, know what they value, know what their concerns are, and address those concerns. Your communication is about them. It's not about you. And if you can win trust, build an emotional connection, then they will listen and accept your message. And I hope that helps. So I'm going to stop presenting now and maybe take some questions. Is that okay, Elmer? Elmer, you're on mute. I can't hear you. I can see we have a question. Elmer, can you hear me? You're on mute. I see we have, yeah, sorry, you're on mute. I can see
some issues. I had some issues with internet connection. Now it's okay, so I hope you can hear me. So now we are moving into the Q&A session, and the first question is from Ibrahim Samadov. Ibrahim, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Michael. First of all, thank you for the presentation. My question might sound a bit complicated, but I'll try to make it as clear as possible. As you said, a good communicator have to dress to satisfy or like to fit in, and they have to first build an emotional bond before addressing what they really want from the audience.
Yes.
I feel like this is what a manipulator also does. So can we say a good communicator is also a good manipulator?
Abraham, that's an excellent question. Why do you ask that?
I feel like because, see, there's a controversial topic about manipulation. It's considered as negative. But if a good communicator can be like a politician, a president, but a manipulator is always a negative, like personality. But if they're actually equal, I feel like manipulators shouldn't be considered negative, or a good communicator should be considered negative. That's why I kind of asked a question like this.
Yeah, I hope I understand you, Abraham. It's a really excellent question, but it comes down to how you use those words, manipulator. And I do agree with you. There can be a fine line between manipulating people, and I think the ones that spring to mind are Donald Trump. I think he manipulated people. I think Boris Johnson has manipulated people. So when you use these techniques to lie, it's very, very bad, and you lose credibility. But we can use these techniques to build a bond, to show we're genuine, and I think that's what I mean, because often a politician will have good intentions, a scientist will have good intentions, but if they only go with the data, they may not be able to work with a community or with a population or a group. And often they need to just create a bond with the best of intentions to show they genuinely care about somebody's issues. But when it turns to manipulation, Hitler was probably the best manipulator. When it turns to manipulation, it's very, very wrong. But I think they can use these to influence for the benefit of people. I don't know if that answers your question, Abraham.
Yeah, you made it very clear. It's all about the intentions. Yeah, I guess I never took it from that perspective. I just thought they're doing the same action, why different results. But I understand what you mean. Thank you.
Thank you, Abraham. It was an excellent question.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Does anyone have a question? Okay, Saida Gasimova, please go ahead.
Yes, hello, Professor Maunselin. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation.
And thank you, Said, for putting on your camera. It's lovely to see somebody. I'm looking at a blank screen. I only see Elmer. So thank you for putting on your camera.
Yeah, thank you, Elmir, for organizing it. Yeah, I understand how it's important. I'm an instructor myself at Western University, and I understand the motivation for the instructor to teach the black screen is very hard. So
yes,
yeah, the emotional connection is very important. Yeah, I understand that. And my question is about these three persuasive modes that you mentioned.
Yes.
I wonder if we can use them to situations when in negotiation situations, when we have to negotiate a deal, let's say, or in conflict resolution. Can these three modes come handy in business situations when it comes to negotiation and conflict resolution? if not, can you give us any tips? I understand it's completely different subject. It's a huge area, but if you can share, as an expert, if you can share with us maybe some tips for conflict resolution and negotiation, that would be excellent.
Saida, that's a super question, and it's not gone off in a different place. We're all human. We're all driven by the same emotions and the same values. And conflict resolution is a big issue in Ireland because of Northern Ireland. We've had a lot of conflict. We had a 30-year war. And while we now have a peace process, there is conflict resolution will take a generation maybe. And even the hostage negotiation or business negotiation, the same techniques apply. It's about building trust, and it's about building that emotion, that connection. And I don't know, Saida, were you at the last webinar with the professor from Indonesia or Malaysia?
No, unfortunately, I missed it. I wasn't there.
So she touched on this as well. And so let's say when business people go from one country to another, you must understand their culture in business negotiation. And you need to spend a lot of time establishing a bond or a link with them to build up trust. And it's only then that the business is done. So in Indonesia, she was saying, you must come for a day or two before we'll even talk business. In Ireland, we try to get the business out of the way so that we can build trust with the people. But it's the same thing. It's showing you respect other people's culture and values. And a lot of conflict resolution is about identity, culture, and values. So that's why, respecting diversity and having inclusion is really, really important. But coming, like Abraham's question, coming with respect and showing you value the other person. Now, this is a big area. I'd love to talk to you more about it. And maybe it's something we can address again in a separate webinar. But it's an excellent question. And I think people often when people hear communication, they think it's maybe talking to your colleagues. But in business, and advertisers know this as well, you must make a connection. And stories is one of the ways we make a connection. And when I remember being in Azerbaijan and going to the carpet factory, carpet museum, and discovering I wasn't looking at carpets, I was looking at stories. And stories are a part of so many cultures. And if you connect with somebody's stories, either in business, where have they come from in their business to create it? What's the story behind the product? You can not only sell your product, but you can get people to understand you, to trust you and accept you. Saida, I hope that's answered your question in some way.
Thank you very much. Yes, it did. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
So next question is from Sevda. Sevda, please go ahead.
Good day, and thank you for your seminar. You talk to us about structure of neuronal system and different parts of the brain. We know that English language is a language of international communication, and young generation and adults try to learn English. What's your advice on how to use brain capabilities for more effective learning of foreign languages? It is my first question. And the second question is, you know that life is not every time sweetie. Sometimes life brings some problems. And the neuronal system of young generation, especially in teenagers in 17 years or 18 years, is not very strong. And it problems bring to depression. What's your advice? What should make for preventing depression on young generation during some problems which comes from life? Thank you.
Thank you, Sarta. I'm not sure I understood the second question, and it might be the internet connection. Maybe if you could ask Elmir and he would say it for me.
Oh, I can repeat.
Yes.
You know that life is not every time easy. Sometimes life brings some problem to our life. And
Yes. Sorry, keep going.
Nearly 17 years, 18 years, not very strong. And sometimes during problems, our young generation go into depression. What your advice? What should make for preventing depression during problem in life? Thank you.
Servda, am I saying it correctly? Servda?
Yes, yes.
Thank you for your two questions. I'll try to answer the second one first, and then maybe you can ask me the other one again. So as I understand it, your question was about young people and maybe depression and issues they face growing up.
Yes, yes. During life problem, which
During
life brings some problem.
Okay, well, one of the first things I would say, and that's not really, the psychology really isn't my area, but what I would say is, I think there is a slight difference between how males and females would handle these issues. And I might be very general here, and I apologize, I don't mean to be, but I think females will speak to each other about their problems. They will share their problems, and they will support each other. I think with males, it's different. I think males, young men, trying to appear stronger and not speak to each other or share their problems. But it's important for us to understand, or I think as a community, even in a university, to have supports for people. And I think it's one of the good things of social media is we can now share, people are now sharing issues, saying, I'm suffering, I was depressed because of this, and they can seek support. And I think it's to create an environment where people are not judged because of their problems. And when they share them, they realize, I'm not the only one. But I think in Ireland, I know the big problem is with young males not speaking about their problems. And one of the worrying things is trying to live up to an American image. And I think part of it is the lack of connection with our own culture. So I think every society needs to put in those supports. We need to accept, and if we show people they're accepted and respected for who they are and not for the problems they're going through. And listening is a very important part of communication. Like say that the last questioner asked about business and international relations, and it's the same with dealing with people with problems. As a communicator, you must listen, and you must show you're listening and give space for the other person to speak. So I'm not sure if I'm addressing your question, Servda.
Okay, thank you.
And we have another question from Saida Gasova. I think she raised her hand again.
Yes, Saida.
Sorry, I feel like I asked too many questions. I don't want to take the valuable time.
That's okay.
The last question from me, I just want to take the opportunity. You're a very experienced communicator, and it's a great opportunity for me to learn from you. So my question is about what's your opinion of the AI, artificial intelligence? Can AI become the communicators, good communicator, and replace people in future? I recently read a book of Yuval Harari, Homo Deus, and he talks about the threats that AI present to the humanity and can eventually replace many professions and many jobs. Do you think it's possible, it's realistic that this they will actually learn this emotional aspect of communication which they are currently missing, right? Is it possible that the robots will eventually replace people in such professions as teaching and doctors, psychologists. So what's your opinion on that? It's very interesting.
Yeah, I've read all of Yuval Harari's book, novel, an excellent writer. I love his books. I have them all. And yes, that's a huge debate now about the future of work. And actually yesterday in my university, we had a whole day talking about the future of work and artificial intelligence. And it has a lot of benefits, especially in repetitive jobs. And I think what he says is that some people will become redundant and useless. But will artificial intelligence, there's a lot of psychologists and scientists believe that it's the emotional part that humans have the advantage on. And the creative, I know AI can write books, some speeches are now written by AI, but they often miss, there are cultural or values that AI cannot pick up on, I'm convinced. So it certainly has a role, and I think we often think of the worst case scenario when we think of AI, of it taking over everything. That isn't going to happen. These connections, and it's funny, the more I read about Aristotle and these ancient Greeks, it's like it was written for today. And yeah, I don't think there will be. I don't think there will. And if they do, I won't be around to see it by the time it gets to that.
Yes, thank you very much. I share your opinion. Yeah, I don't think they will be able to replace that emotional aspect of that we have. I don't think that's technologically possible.
I think they can mimic to some extent.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of learning going on with these Siri and these things, trying to learn it, but it isn't the same. It isn't the same. We are the most advanced creature that ever walked the planet.
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to create a robot to outdo us.
Thank you very much.
We have another question from Dr. Rusal Kerli. Rusal, please.
Oh, this is great.
Thank you very much, Professor Mike. Thank you very much for your interesting speech. Really, it took me far away. And of course, Saida Hanum's comments about this artificial intelligence. And I think that does someone needs our emotions? Does someone cares about our emotions? I do believe in that. The artificial intelligence will replace. It's not a question. It's just a kind of debating or kind of commenting. I think that it will. This is my own comments or my own mind ideas about that. Yes, it will replace humanity. I agree that the human is one of the best creature in the world, we would say, but so-called, because we have agreed, okay, we are talking that we have emotions, we have feelings, but we forget about our thoughtlessness, about our greed, about that unconsciously killing all human live beings like animals or human. So how we can say that, how we can pretend that we are the advanced or we are the perfect creature in the world? This is kind of think that other professions will replace, but except psychologists, because we need someone to listen us. Teachers, now during this COVID-19 period, really we and our students lost our emotions. We don't have a face-to-face or eye contact during the classes. That's why the quality decreased in every way in the world. That's why people are suffering. I mean, students are suffering, more teachers suffering because they can't deliver or they can't pass. Students is really interestingly, without any emotions, they just turn off their microphone, turning off their videos and sleeping, and we are crying here, telling something, trying to persuade that please open your camera, your mic. this is kind of things that's, and another issue is about the classes, about this. The issue is about the communication, the importance of communication skills right now, not only Azerbaijan, the whole world lacks is the testing exam system. After everywhere, entrance exam is mostly in our world, in our part of country, let's say, is entrance exam is test. During the semester, it's all the exams are provided with test. So students lack the communication skills. When they go somewhere, when they apply somewhere, they ask the first question, the exam will be, or interview will be based on test, or it will be oral. Yeah. This is kind of thing. So what's your comment about this issue? How we can figure out on this issue, like switching to the oral examination, or how it will be fair, because we know that not in Azerbaijan, I would say everywhere, there is problems with the marking or evaluation system, the universities or in somewhere.
Wow, that was a lot.
Yes, that's right. Sorry.
Where do I start, Russell? But great. I love your enthusiasm. I love your connection. I can feel it across the internet. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, thank you.
And I can make eye contact with you, and you're smiling. So it's funny. That was a huge effect. Thank you. Yeah, it's a really interesting debate. And when education started out, I think our education is a little bit out of date, our system. When it started out, people had to remember facts because there were so few books and there was no internet. So that's how education started out. You had to memorize things because you might not have access to the information again. Nowadays, in this new world, you don't have to remember anything because you can Google it. All the facts you want are there. So what I'm doing we're setting up a new university in Ireland. It will be established. We're just waiting for the government to give the go-ahead. One of the things we're exploring about assessment is applying knowledge. How do you apply? Can we assess people in how they apply the knowledge, not how much they remember? Because the need for memory is going to be gone soon. But it's, can you apply it in different situations? And how can we assess? So we've got to be careful. What do we assess? And how do we assess it? So in my communications course, there's very little about remembering. Aristotle said the ethos, the pathos, and what does that mean? They have to stand up and they have to deliver presentations to live audiences with business people, politicians, and scientists in the audience. So it's I think the new form of assessment will be applying knowledge in different situations. And I agree with you about the emotions also. We're an emotional, we are chemical factories full of emotions. And there are cultural differences. So I don't think AI is going to have all those cultural differences built in. Unfortunately, I think a lot of because we speak English as the universal language, and a lot of our social media and our entertainment is coming from America, I don't want that to become the dominant culture. I think we need to appreciate lots of cultures. And it really came home to me in Azerbaijan. I did not realize the culture of Azerbaijan. I did not realize the values. And Azerbaijan as a nation is so important in your region. You bring so many countries together. As a light, it's certainly a country that Europe can work with and values.
Thank you very much for your comments and very good approaches. Thank you very much.
I think we have a time for one last question. Does anyone have a question? If not, I have a question submitted to me by one of my colleagues. So he asks, Mike, what would be your advice to students during the COVID-19 period? Because now students are sitting at home They're using computers to join classes, and they have very little space, very little room for communication. How they can cope with challenges?
The whole world is facing that challenge. I face it in Ireland. The universities I work with in the UK are facing it. I think what universities need to be aware of this. And I think, like the last questioner, we need to maybe change how we assess people. I think we need more space for open discussion, rather than the information all going one way. And we will have to design it. If this continues, we will have to change what we assess and how we assess it. But there's a need to create a stronger sense, to create a sense of community. And I know some of the things I did with my students was, and I could have 3-hour lectures, a 3-hour long lecture with some of my students. But we might take the first hour and we might say, tell us something you're in your room. What's on your, I give different tasks. What's on your desk? And they pick up a mug and say, why do you have that mug? I support Manchester United. And somebody, oh, so do I. And people miss Roy Keane. And so we try to get them to connect on other issues and feel part of a community rather than a class. I don't know if that helps, but it's a challenge we're all facing. But I hope in September we will be back in our lecture rooms and in our universities.
Fingers crossed, we also hope so.
Yeah, and I think the universities need to throw a party for all the students when they get back.
Why not? Why not?
And invite foreign professors.
Okay, Mike, thank you very much for a very interesting and very insightful presentation today. And it was our honor to host you for today's webinar. And I believe for all of us it was a very productive, productive event. And hopefully we will have another webinar with you, because in today's webinar you mentioned we didn't have a time to cover body language, gesture, and other parts of the communication. Hopefully in upcoming months we will schedule another webinar with you based on your availability. And today's webinar is over, so I would like to ask you if you have any final words for our students or for our community at university.
Just for the university and for your students, use every opportunity you can to practice your communication skills. Communication across Europe is now seen as a competitive advantage. On LinkedIn, there's now an option to make a presentation online. So use every opportunity to practice your communication skills, because we need leaders in science, in business, and technology, in women's rights, in equality, in the arts. We need those leaders. You can't be a leader unless you have followers. And you can't have followers unless you can communicate and connect with people. If I can help any of you at any time, please get in touch. And you can contact me on LinkedIn. That's how to connect with me. Please look up Mayk Maunselin on LinkedIn. And if I can help at any stage, let me know. I just want to try say, Çok sağ olun.
Çok sağ olun, Mike. Çok sağ olun. I would like to take the opportunity also thanks to all the participants who joined to our event. We have some participants from our partner universities from Moldova and from Central Asia. Thank you very much for joining us, and thanks once again, Mike. Çok sağ olun.
Çok sağ olun.
Sağ olun.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Sağ olun.